we've always had some form of aquaculture, but the European groups really lost it. In the Middle Ages, all the monasteries grew carp, very much as Japanese do today, but they grew European carp. And then, I don't know why, perhaps the monasteries, loss of faith in religion. The monastery sort of collapsed and the carp dried up. And then there was no tradition of aquaculture brought over here or to Australia. So we didn't have any aquacultures when I was a boy. But now we grow thousands of sorts of water organisms. There's also an extremely large list of excellent water plants grown in water and sold commercially. The ones you're most familiar with would be watercress, I suppose. It's not such a big thing in the States, is it, watercress? But in Europe, and particularly in England, it's constantly supplied. It's a very popular salad plant. Some of the staple foods of Asia are water grown, and there's sort of two ways to grow them. You can, with the kangkong, which is the most popular spinach in Asia. It's an ipomea. Get that O in there. Ipomea aquatica, kangkong. Those of you who've been tipped down about in Thailand, like our friend Pauline here, would know kangkong. Would you know kangkong? She would. It's the most popular spinach in the area. It's blanched briefly, dipped into boiling water before you serve it, or it's stir-fried briefly. It can be grown one of two ways. You can grow it in flowing streams by driving a bamboo into the base and then lashing a bit of kangkong there, and it spreads out like a pool on the water. It's commonly grown like that. Or you can grow it in some form of waru, sort of like a shallow pond, which has beds built up in it, and you grow it on here. And in here you grow some form of fish or some form of crayfish. These are a kind of productive, that name, by the way, is High Country Peru. Productive water land, and then there's usual water land harmonic, very common to a lot of countries. You see it in Kashmir, Thailand, Mexico, and we commonly use the Mexican name of chinampas. We've just built some chinampa, and we also are trellising across the water. So you have trellis crop, water crop, and land crop. In the tropics, it's an excellent place for banana growing on here. So in here you can grow your water animals, fish or crayfish. On here you grow your land crop, and across here you can grow heavy yielding vine crop, most of which will bear on this horizontal trellis. Vines traditionally in forests always grow by the waterside, and they are happiest beside the water. In forests, the only open place in the forest for vines is by the river there, forests here, and the vines traditionally live where light is sufficient by the rivers. And they cross the rivers by going up a thin tree here, by bending it over till it gets over there, and the vine will actually then cross the river like that. And when you come along and the tree's rotted, you wonder how that vine ever got across there. And that's how it got there. Right. So vines really belong in this land-water interface. It's true of hops, grapes. If you go looking for the fox grapes in the United States, where do you find them? on the edge of the marshy bottomlands. And you'll find most of your natural vines do well there. So you have fish, plants, shellfish, and some form of crustacean as common crops. In the Pacific Islands, because of overexploitation of the giant clam and of the turbo shell and of, what's the one they make buttons from, triangular one? No, not abalone. This one that you make pearl buttons from. No, it's not. Abalone's like that. That's abalone. It's not a limpet. It's a big. It's about that life size. That is. These were made extinct locally on reefs from overexploitation in the days when all button. No, no, no. I'll think of it. Don't worry. Just temporary. I've lost it in the marsh in here. So. Of very recent years, we've been able to breed these and the giant clams and reseed reefs. And some of the benefits of that have been, like only 70 of these were taken to an isolated reef off Micronesia. And now the local people harvest 7 tonnes of them a year on a sustainable level. So, you know, the advantages of reseeding extinct areas are great, which is why I said to you, if you look historically at the trees that were here, you may find none of them, some of them are left. Ponderosas would be a good example. Therefore, you need to bring ponderosa in and start it again, because the potential yield of some species that have disappeared are great, and they belong. Abalone, too, have been farmed recently, and you tend to farm those on some form of fibre boards in a frame. You can grow acres of abalone just on a set of boards hung parallel in the water. The enemy of the abalone is a crayfish. It's the food of the crayfish. So you can put these boards close enough to let abalones get in, but large crayfish can't enter between the leaves of the boards. And small crayfish can't pull the abalone off. I don't think there's very much we're not growing in water. Okay, so what are the necessitous precursors to aquacultures? First of all, you want either a reliable supply of water of good quality, and that's a problem, or you want to specialise in still pond cultures. That is, by catching water during rainy seasons, run still ponds. Now, you can run still ponds even in the tropics, where they go almost totally anaerobic. But to do it, you have to pick the right assembly of animals and plants. When you get to the monsoon tropics and you have totally anaerobic ponds, all the things we would grow, from trout to catfish, won't live. But there are a whole set of air-breathing fish who are totally immune to anaerobic water. Some of them have things very like lungs, like the Australian lungfish, but many of the Indian species have all sorts of different modifications. All of them breathe air. And some of the tiny little galaxiid fish which act there as minnows come up and swallow a bubble of air and absorb the oxygen from the gut lining. So if you only got still ponds and you're only in the tropics, you can still carry on an aquaculture using any number of plants and air-breathing fish. So you can go to quite extreme condition and still grow fish. But ideally, you get more fish if you have some slight flow through the pond. It doesn't have to be a great flow. It's just a constant replacement of water, equivalent to having a 1/4 inch gap under your door in a room like this. You get about 20 changes of air a day. So you only need a relatively slight water flow into ponds to change the water enough to increase your growth rate. The yield of fish goes up as your flow or changeover of water in a pond increases. Or, fish grow better in a flowing canal than they do in a still pond. The highest yields of fish have been taken from canal cages in Southeast Asia. And they're huge yields, but we don't expect to normally get that. So if you have canals flowing and you have a cage of fish in them, they'll do very well because food's just travelling to the fish. Nice situation. One of the peculiar things about this too, if you're growing watercress commercially, which you can do in a shallow swamp with mounds really, is mound a swamp, small mounds, and put your watercress in. You just tuck a stem in, that's all. And if, no matter how shallow it is, if you can arrange that there's some movement of water through, you probably double the yields of your cress. For the same reason is that nutrient is always coming through and always being absorbed by the plants, which are why water plants are such good cleansers of water. They're very efficient at removing nutrient. Even in the marine environment, it takes something like 10 minutes for fish and algae to remove the phosphate from the water. You go out into the sea with a bag of phosphate and throw it out, and 10 minutes later it's all grabbed. And usually it doesn't move. And years ago, before we thought a lot about native ecologies, I took part in a small experiment on a totally barren highland tarn with a rock base. We went across the tarn, filled little paper bags with superphosphate and dropped them over the side of the boat, and they sank. And that was about 30 years ago. And still today, those clumps of phosphate are visible as tall columns of weed from the bottom of an otherwise barren lake. But they haven't moved. They haven't moved 2 feet. So water organisms are very fast at grabbing and stabilising nutrient. And it may be, too, that's some sort of answer to you. If you worry about bird shit washing into a water tank off your roof, well, 10 minutes later it might as well not have been there. It's fastened into the algal mat on the inside of the tank. So don't worry about it, because it limits to density in ponds is the amount of oxygen available to the fish. If you imagine having some sort of a pond of some sort of shape like this, and you have an airline here with air bubbles ascending from it, you get bubbles rising and you get a distinct overturn like that. And you can't get a dead layer of water down here because it's continually turning the water over.
And these do collect the roof rainwater.
You can run these purely on rainwater. Yeah. Now, let's draw back and look at general principles. And we'll start off by saying the orders of sizes of ponds. What is a good thing to do in ponds of different sizes? Okay. I think every annual garden benefits from a pond no more than 1 or 2 metres across. And we commonly make them out of tractor tyres. We just cut off the upper tread, cut that off, and leave that one. and make a hole in the ground. Sorry, a hole in the ground, and drop the tire in and put plastic right across there and just fill it up with water. And you have quite a stable pond because the tire forms a stable lip on the pond. And then you put rocks across there. And that will produce mainly salads for you. It's not much, it's unlikely to produce any significant quantity of anything but salads. So you grow watercress, kangkong, taro, whatever, in or out of pots in such a pond. And you get quite a very good yield. In fact, if you're in the subtropics in Miami and you grow kangkong, one plant is a ton for your family. It just rages out of there, you know. It's not a bad idea to put some small fish in merely for mosquito control. And whichever fish you like to put in there, little rice fish, little mountain cloud minnows, pupfish in the deserts, and so on, but they just keep the mosquitoes out of your pond. They're not enough to be significant food. So for small ponds of 1 or 2 metres across, the only sane use of them is either little nurse ponds for breeding aquarium fish or for producing salad plants for table. Now, go up a slight amount to small earth ponds a few metres across. And here you can produce a large quantity of taro. Taro is one of the high production crops, you know, as a staple crop. 3 roots of taro growing on for about 8 months can produce something like 150 pounds weight of, you know, complex starches. So, and it's expensive, taro. It's a staple of the Pacific. It's what all the Hawaiians eat, which of course you know very well. One of the advantages of taro is that when you peel it and cook it, it has a very good salad from these. You have to steam or cook taro leaves because they contain oxalic acid spicules. You only ever try raw taro leaf once in your life, unless you like the sensation of red hot needles stuck in your tongue and throat. I was harvesting taro on Maui with an old Hawaiian guy. We were there telling old men's jokes to each other, you know, grumping around. And you've got to dig it with a wooden spade, you know, because most cultures won't allow steel to contact their food plants. Only we would dig things with steel. And there may actually be a reason for this. They're finding very different reactions from steel in contact with food than from wood. Struck that recently. I was quite surprised. I just thought it was some sort of superstition, you know. But I have an open mind. And if we find that steel affects food differently from wood, well, there you are, we found that. So we're levering out our taros and trimming the tops off, all going fine. Put them in a bag. And I put a bag on my back. I just wearing my lap, you know. And I carried it out of the field. And by the time I got out of the field, already my back was burning. And the old guy said, "Hey, wait a minute, put that bag down." He said, "You've got oxalic acid spicules right all over your back." He said, "We're just going to have to shave you." So I got a big, sharp machete. He said, "Bend over," and he shaved my back with this machete. A tourist car came past and stopped and said, "Can you imagine what those buggers are saying? You know? What's that old Hawaiian? Is he going to eat that white fella?" Yeah. Said, "I ought to cut a couple of ribs out just to keep me interested." Yeah. Well, some of the taro are called elephant ear. Elephant ear is a different genus, and it has a different product. Taro is colocasia. And elephant ear is properly called konjac. It's alocasia, konjac. And this is used, it's become very important, an alkaline starch. And it's used extremely widely. Japanese have used it forever. Don't call it elephant ear because there's a lot of plants call it konjac. Colocasia has thousands, there's probably about plus or minus 1,500 varieties of taro. Some taros are so widely variable that you could make quite a collection of them. There are celery taros lacking spicules, so you can just eat them raw. There are luau taros that is specifically grown for a lot of top growth for spinaches, rich in iron, high in vitamin A. There are root taros intended for baking and dry cooking, and root taros intended for boiling and the making of poi. So there's a whole, it's like potatoes. There's a lot of sorts of spuds, and they suit different soils and different uses. You can grow taro in shallow water, or you can grow taro on terraces in dry lands, heavily mulched and frequently wetted. And terrace taro is very dense. You get a lot of starch per unit weight. And water taros are relatively watery and not as valued, really. Okay. The taro is a very good plant for a small patch. It will provide, a very little patch of taro will provide all your staple food for a year. Yeah, and it's good food. Well, the other thing to say about taro is you boil it, pound it, sprinkle water on, make a thickish paste out of it, ferment it for 3 days. It has a natural lactic acid bacteria on the plant. Ferment it for 3 days. It turns into poi, which is a subacid food full of the B vitamins. You get a yeast bacteria ferment. So it's a nutritious food. It's also the sort of tropical equivalent, non-cow keeping equivalent to yogurt. So you can use poi, ice water, mint, and some fruit juice and produce, excellent subacid drinks. Yeah. So it's a sort of vegetarian's yogurt, poi. Just, if you think back, just as we pointed out that ensete, that banana we can grow in deserts, will ferment readily to a high vitamin flour. Poi readily ferments. It's actually as acid as you like in 3 days. Hawaiians can take it a bit further and enjoy it, but we find it a little bit too acid by about day 5 to eat. So as you scale up from a few square metres to 10 to 12, 20 square metres, you can go to staple foods. And so I believe that ponds should be a part of every garden. Taro, pretty hardy plant, but if you're suffering from cold, it's a good idea to grow them in a little, hoop shelter. What do you call? Yeah, little glass house thing. But it's one of the easiest staple foods to grow. I include here, potatoes. It's actually easier to grow than potatoes.
Does winter open?
No, it doesn't normally, but it will hang on here, and it can go quiescent and come out in spring. So it's not affected by being killed by cold. It will reject. It's like bananas, you know, they'll kill down and come again. Yeah, the sort of fish you grow with taro, you put what's called a kettle in. We'll use the word kettle again. A kettle's simply a deeper area of pond which is so deep that the bottom won't freeze or so deep that it won't overheat. And if you put a kettle in a pond, you can grow fairly large fish. You can grow prawns with taro, and that's commonly done. Or you can grow vegetarian fish, which don't eat the taro because of the oxalic acid spicules. And they can range out and do all your weeding for you. They eat all the rest of the weeds. There are several fish, from grass carp to tilapia, that actually just eat weeds. So they're handy. Good. Another high value crop out of medium sized ponds is, you know, a sort of 4 by 5 metre pond. Snail, water snails, poo-oo, poo-oo, poo-oo. You know that little song? This is your taro treading, mud treading down song, like you trod down this thing, or your swale building song. You get in your taro patch, you know, and you all move treading down the clay. Say, poo-oo, poo-oo, he-nay, he-nay, poo-oo, poo-oo, he-nay, he-nay, oh, moe, moe, poo-oo, poo-oo, he-nay, he-nay, poo-oo is the snail. And the other part is a bird that's sung by the bird calling the star. So come here, little snail, come closer. I want to admire you. You know, I think, got you, you stupid bastard. I'll teach you to trust birds. Yeah, that's what the song says. So you're treading out your taro paddy. It's like a lot of these nice sounding, romantic sort of sounding little songs. No, they're pretty grotty when you look at the actual translation. I have friends who look to get 40 or 50 pounds of fish a year out of these little ponds. A fish a week. To 1/8 to 1/4 acre ponds. And these are the ideal ponds for aquaculture. So here you start, you know, fish growing. 1 or 2 of these is enough for a small community. I have a friend with an 8-acre pond in Hawaii, and he runs 30 ducks here, and ducks go down a little walk into the water, feeds the ducks pellets, the ducks fertilise the pond, and he rears large freshwater prawns, Macrobrachium rosenbergi. We'll go into that in a minute. It doesn't have to be square. I've made it square so it's easy for you to measure it, that's all. Macrobrachium rosenbergi. And every 6 months he harvests $30,000 worth of large prawns, but he doesn't feed them. Then he restocks it. 6 months later, another 30,000 on 1/8 of an acre. So he considers he has a full income from his 8-acre pond. He has ducks and duck eggs and prawns to eat, and an income. Subtropics. With an 1/8 of an acre, you can arrange your own subtropics. You only need big hoops and some plastic, and you're in the subtropics.
How
Yeah.
deep is?
About a metre, yeah. 3 feet.
They're all three models are about the same depth.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
Surface area.
It's a useful depth. A taro patch is not 3 feet deep, but you have a kettle in it 3 feet deep, and the taro grows in water about 9 inches deep. Right. So this is about where sensibly you stop pond size. You know, this is the ideal pond size. Now you scale up. You know, if you have 16 of these, if you have 4 acres of these, or 8 of these, 16 of these, let's say, quarter acre ponds, then you are very rich fish culturist. You can grow $250,000 worth of eels a year. You can grow, a couple of $100,000 worth of any other pond fish a year. So 8 acres is a large income. But at 8 to 12 acres, it's a full-time, everyday job. You have to be there every day. It's like chickens or geese or, you need to be at your ponds every day, checking on every pond daily. But that's okay. With that sort of income, you can employ somebody. Some lousy $30,000 salary to run around most of the time while you're down on the coast surfing. No, as running and still water systems. It's always an advantage, even if you have a 2-inch or an 1.5-inch flow pipe coming into one pond and take it to the next and so on. It's always an advantage, but it's not strictly necessary. But if you don't have running water, you have to have some fast way to measure oxygen content of the water. And on summer nights, on very warm nights, with a lot of algae in the pond, your oxygen levels fall so low that all your fish may die, and then you have to have aerators. And you have to pump air into your pond or paddle air into the surface of the pond. And some people are so frightened of losing their fish, they simply keep their paddles going all the time. Anyhow. Because when you lose them, you lose a lot. It doesn't matter if oxygen deficit's there for a quarter of an hour, your fish are dead. That's why you need to be around your ponds every day and just checking on them, measure your pH. When your pH starts to fall, your oxygen will follow soon after. So as soon as your pH starts to decline, you expect trouble from oxygen deficiency just ahead of that. Right, so start your paddlers, for God's sake, at that point. Yeah. Helps a lot. Helps oxygenation. Weeds don't. Weeds supply oxygen during the day, but they don't at night. They absorb it. So weedy ponds can go anaerobic fairly quickly. Now, so these are the sort of scales. Now, 4 acres of these ponds, that's 16 ponds, you're a pretty rich fish grower, okay? 8 or 12 acres, you're a multi-millionaire with intensive fish growing. Thousands of acres, you go broke. There's a bust point because the early approaches were to buy a large flat property, put in 500-acre pond, stock it, run big trucks along the levees with chicken pellets flying out the sides. And And of course, when you lose a pond, you lose an immense amount of money. I remember in Hawaii, they started growing prawns like this. It's all but been abandoned. And people start to cut up these large sections and keep a close watch on much smaller ponds. There is a fish that's an indicator species called elephant fish. It comes from the Amazon, and it emits a totally regular electric pulse. It's silty water fish, so it actually has electrosensing of its environment, and it's going boom, boom, boom. And what you do is you measure that interval of the pulse, and any variation in the pulse is an alarm. And so you have this in line from a pond outlet. So the pond outlet water goes into the elephant fish in line. And then the elephant fish will set off an alarm for you. And that's patented, would you believe? Yeah, that's a patented system. It's used throughout Europe for monitoring city water supplies. Elephant fish sense radioactivity, hydrocarbons, all sorts of pollutants. They're very sensitive to changing water temperatures, oxygen levels, water quality, and they just ring the bell. Well, in Germany, actually, that causes the whole system to turn off till people arrive and see what it was that set the elephant fish off. It's true that experienced fish farmers, knowing their own ponds and their own fish, can often look at the ponds or feel the water and make a good judgment about condition of food, oxygen, and so on. They probably estimate pH accurately. All fish farmers are like that. They fly in the end only by the seat of their pants. They throw all their instruments away. It's not true that you can't, be careful. The thing is, you can either keep your paddlers going all day and all night, which most people do because it's cheaper than losing your fish, or you can put an automatic oxygen monitor in that sets off your paddlers. And although it costs you a couple of $1,000, that again is very cheap. So, you can choose the way you... The main thing is not to let your pond collapse totally, if possible. Yeah. But you have to take it seriously. There's nothing worse than coming out and find all your fish died during the night. Okay, so you're up about here now. We touched on another subject in narrow valleys where your stream was there and where now you can divide the stream and have sets of ponds. You can actually run water along here and have an off-take line to each pond. That's sort of some ideal setup. So each pond has an individual intake and an individual outflow. And that isolates each one from the other. So if you have a relatively good water supply here, each pond has excellent water and you can't transmit disease. If you have very limited water supply from a point source like a spring, however, you might have to set up systems where you have a flow in series, in line. And then in that case, there is some risk of transferring disease pond to pond. But maybe you don't have a choice. Maybe you don't have enough water to give each pond a flow. So there are two basic layouts. And you'll have both of them in most farms. You'll have examples of both these sorts of layouts. Sometimes you'll be able to give each pond a flow. Sometimes you'll have to rely on a single flow to do a lot of ponds. So you don't have a lot of choice. And let's look at the pond. So you have a 1/4 acre of water. do we want all the pond as a fish pond? Or do we want part of the pond as a place where food can be grown to feed the fish? And if you look at the work from Auburn University in Alabama by a bloke called Swingles, he says that 1/3 to 1/2 of your pond can be devoted to dense vegetation supporting a lot of invertebrate life like shrimps and even tiny fish, little freshwater crabs, all those guys, and that they then offset the food cost of your fish, who can live in here but who can't get in there. You could actually put a mesh fence there if you wish. And we think that he's right. We think that you should always devote 1/3 of the water to the production of food for the fish. But there are other things you can do. You know, we call it, what sort of pond furniture can you provide? I like that term, pond furniture. You can raft today with just simple glued down pipe or hard plastic pipes, and you can put cultures on the raft. You can put pill bugs in hay and palings. You can put bananas and grow fruit fly, and the maggots drop through the rafts. So you can provide rafts which have fairly constant supply of food down to the fish. I believe that you can make a compost box in the water, filling it with hay. It goes anaerobic, and it breeds sulfur bacteria, and they breed zooplankton. So I think you can localise composting in water. So you wouldn't do much of it because you make the whole pond anaerobic, but you could compost in this corner, have it shallows to there, and have that as aerobic water. And you'll breed an awful lot of bacteria out of there. And that rapidly breeds zooplankton, and that's what fish like. Okay, you can compost it there. You have compost box underwater where you get sulfur fixing bacteria. You can have cultures in here of shrimp and feed the shrimp. You don't have to feed the fish, you feed the shrimp. So most of your feeding can occur here, and the shrimp are continually breeding, and little shrimp breed very fast and swimming out and feeding your fish. So, or you can feed ducks, and the ducks range in here and add fertiliser, and the shrimp grow on that, and then they feed the fish. So you get ducks, shrimp, and fish. That sort of, it's not the cost of the food. It's the route way you send the food in the end that says how much you make, really.
The compost, it's totally in the water. I mean,
Mhm.
it's saturated, the soap.
Yep.
You're throwing your kitchen compost directly
Yep,
into the
and
pot.
straw and so on, into a box which is just a little bit above the water on top, but most of your stuff is going underwater. And it smells like sulphur. It smells like marsh gas. And sulphur bacteria just are beaming out of it. And zooplankton love them.
So it can't be close to a house or something like that.
Yeah, you wouldn't really notice it 20 feet away. You go down there and sniff closely, you'll smell the sulphur.
So the shrimp will also be feeding on decay,
What are? Bacteria?
bacteria.
Yeah, your whole chain goes sort of bacteria, phytoplankton, zooplankton, shrimp, fish. Yeah. But you know, if you can breed a lot of bacteria, you're going to get a lot of phytoplankton. Some fish eat that and don't eat anything else. You've got algal eating fish. They go around sort of scoop. They got gill rakers on their gills, and then most fish don't stop there. They actually go after the zooplankton. So when they're little, they eat phytoplankton, and as they grow about bigger than that, they start eating zooplankton, and they may stay there forever on zooplankton, or later in their life they may become carnivores, eat your prawns. Really, in water, it's a question of who has the biggest mouth. That's all. Yeah. When you first put your little fish in, they spawned eggs. They look a bit like milky water, you know, and they're tiny little fish attached to egg sacs. And at that point, back swimmers, little insects come over and grab them and eat them. So at that point, zooplankton eat fish. And then immediately fill upon in come your, those guys, dragonflies. And they start laying eggs like mad, and they have little mud-eye larvae, we call them mud-eyes, and they start eating fish, okay? But later, the same fish eat mud-eyes.
Gives the fish a good motivation.
Yeah, right. It's kind of a revenge thing, really. Yeah.
Bill, what was that orchid you had?
Oh, okay. No, I'll be clearer. You try to breed bacteria, which are the basis of all life forms. I mean, you are nothing but a kind of a loose collection of many bacteria. You know, barely kept together with your belt. Right. Take the bacteria away, what have you got? Nothing but a belt buckle. And the bacteria are tiny, and they're eaten by little tiny predators called zooplankton, Z-O-O plankton, zooplankton. You say the O twice when you see that little umlaag above it. It says say O twice, zooplankton. Zooplankton. Then they're eaten, no, sorry, what eats bacteria are little green motile things with whip antenna called phytoplankton. Bacteria then are eaten by phytoplankton, little green plants who are eaten by zooplankton, who are eaten by usually some form of crustacea, shrimps and so on, are eaten by fish. That's a kind of build-up you get over time, anyhow, in a pond. Phytoplankton are algae. One really serious thing in ponds is predation. And it's surprising, a lot of your predation occurs from the air from birds. Kingfishers, kookaburras, cormorants, very serious predators, snake birds, all the herons, the edge-wading herons with their sharp and spearing bill. So these are serious predators. They're eating 150, 200 fish a day or something, a couple of meals. So they're costing you hundreds of dollars every day. So our ponds are this shape, and we haven't done it yet, but we know this is going to work. We're going to put fence space in there, put a rail along here, put a rail here, and wrap a mesh over that. And then our little fish can swim into the sides of the ponds. Nothing can get them. And we'll put hay or branches on top so they're in shade in here. And we think they'll mainly live in there. And when they venture out on the pond and a cormorant comes in, they simply can dive into these refugia. And that excludes our wading birds too, because they can't actually wade in the pond edge at all. When I say a mesh, it'll be a big mesh. Birds can't get through it, but little fish can come and go. So this sort of general idea is called escapement. So you must provide a lot of escapement. There's other ways you can do it. You can freight a raft, put some slats on for shade, and drop a finer mesh net to the bottom. And your little fish can come in and out, but your cormorant can't. It can't get through mesh like that. So it'll shelter the little fish. And that's a really essential part, I believe, of your pond success, of reducing predators. If you've got to go a little bit further, then the rest of it seems fairly easy. You put some concrete in a tyre or something like that, put a tall post up here, and just run mesh across there, coarse mesh. And this eventually is what most fish farmers get to. You do it in stages. You fight your way through your first year shooting cormorants, which you never can really effectively shoot. Then you get some escapement in because that lets most of your fish get away from cormorants, and eventually you net your pond. And it all depends on, how much income you're getting every year. But the potential income from netting a pond is great. So if you could afford to do it to start with, you're much better off. Just north of where we live, there's a guy growing crayfish. He sends about 90 tonnes a month off to Hong Kong. And he's netted the whole of his 8 acres over the period of a few years he's been going. So he had 8 acres under net. And here and there stuck in the net occasionally, a cormorant, stupid cormorant dies. But most of them don't even bother to try to crash through. But occasionally you see a cormorant hanging there. And then to keep the grass down around his ponds, he has sheep. And sheep are not quite, all together either. So they're occasionally falling in the ponds. And so a sheep has fallen in the pond during the night if you find a couple of bits of wool flat on top, because the crayfish reckon this is just pennies from heaven. So they eat the sheep. Yeah. Maybe they kick a sheep in occasionally, who knows? Geese are good grazers, and they get a proportion of that in the water, so they grow your phytoplankton. Yeah. Now geese are good, ducks are very good. There's a limit. You can't put 300 ducks on a quarter of an acre, but you can put 30 or 40. If you put 300, too much phytoplankton, too much oxygen demand, and your pond goes anaerobic. It's well past time for reasonable people to have a ciggy. Yeah, or a cup of tea or anything else. Yeah, I'm a very reasonable man.
Bill, do you have to